All right, we're going to get into it. All right, Morena Tauranga, Moana, good morning to everyone in this wonderful place we call home. No mai, haere mai, welcome to the council meeting of Tuesday the 16th of December 2025. In terms of health and safety, if the alarm sounds, please make your way down Devonport Road towards the Strand. Please be aware that this meeting will be live streamed on YouTube and the video will be publicly available later. Members, could you please remember to speak clearly into your microphones, and we will each have 5 minutes to speak. Please turn off your mobile phones. I'd like to hand to Councillor Rolleston if he could please give us an opening karakia. Thank you.
Tēnā koe, te koro matua mai, morena koutou. I'd like to offer our karakia this morning to the whānau in Bondi. Nā mi aroa ki a koutou i tēnei wā, e tino pauri, tēnā akau, anei moi mai rā. So obviously sad, and we offer all of our thoughts and our prayers to the family in Bondi at this time. Nō reira, kia noi tātou. Tui runga, tui raro, tui roto, tui waho, tui te here tangata, karongo te a, karongo te pō, nau mai te ihi, te wē, te mana, te tapu, paupau ki roto, ki a mātou, mō tēnei ata, ko ia rā e rongo, whakairiraki ki runga, turu whakamaua ki a tīna. Haumi e, hui e.
Tai ki e.
Kia ora.
Just note, how Tapu has an apology for lateness, but otherwise there is no further apologies. Ask for a mover and seconder to accept that apology for lateness. Councillor Schuler, Councillor Taylor, thank you. All those in favour? Those against?
Aye.
Aye, so is online.
Aye, morena. Not far away.
He's online, but he'll be here shortly. We have one public forum speaker, but they will be speaking and publicly excluded. So we will do that later in the meeting. Yep. There are no late items, but there were 7 items included in the supplementary agendas that were circulated on Wednesday. 6 of those were public and 1 publicly excluded. There are also some attachments, separated circulated attachment documents, and I note there's one tabled here for when we're looking at the rates and annual plan next year. There's no confidential business to be transferred into the open. And at this stage, we will take it in the order of business. Item 13.3, however, will be dealt with at approximately 3:30. So depending on where we get to with the agenda, will depend on whether that is in order or not. Confirmation of minutes. I note there's minutes of the council meeting held on 29th of October 2025. That is part 1, page 8. So that's the original agenda, page 8. Could I call for we'll firstly call if there's any corrections to those minutes? If there's no corrections to those minutes, could I have a mover and seconder to accept those as a true and correct record? Councillor Taylor, Councillor Roseboom, thank you. All those in favour? Those against? Those minutes are a true and correct record. That is carried. We also have 7.2. This is on the open agenda, page 22. Is there any corrections to those minutes? think I'd just be keen to draw members' attention to page 32 and the reasons for the decision. Does that accurately reflect in the members' minds whether that was the reasoning for that decision? Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, both of those things to me were discussed at the time, and the other one I thought that was the definition of affordable. Depending on where you're sitting, affordable can have quite a variable range, so potentially there was difficulty in understanding that, I think.
Yeah.
So whether we wanted to add that in.
Subjective.
Yep.
Affordability is subjective, yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Therefore, I'll also ask for a mover and seconder. Those minutes are confirmed as a true and correct record. So that's the 18th of November 2025. A mover and seconder for that. Councillor Schuler, Councillor Taylor again. All those in favour? Those against? That is carried. I call for any declarations of interest. Is there any declarations of interest? If there's no conflicts or declarations, if you become aware of one during the meeting, please draw it to my attention and we will note those. There is no deputations, presentations or petitions, and there is no recommendations from other committees. So now we'll get straight into it. 11.1, update to the funding and financing for Te Manawa-Taki o Te Papa. This is on the supplementary council open agenda, and it is on page 4. And I'll hand over to Susan and Catherine to take us through this.
Okay, good morning, councillors. So this paper, as the title says, is an update for funding and financing for Te Manawa-Taki o Te Papa. It follows on from the workshop held last month with elected members on the changes that have happened since the first decisions on Te Manawa-Taki o Te Papa in terms of funding opportunities and costs. And it relates directly to the next report as well, which is the annual plan report. At that workshop, there was some interest in the use of parking surpluses, the use of airport surpluses, and the asset realisation. The annual plan report, I'm just sort of jumping forward, we had a loaded expectation of airport surplus contribution. We had not loaded into that working draft annual plan the parking surplus contribution pending council decision, or the asset realisation program has also not been loaded for the year against the annual plan, pending decisions on that. So overall,
can I just interrupt? Yep. Loaded, what does loaded mean?
Oh, sorry. So the draft budgets, or the working draft budgets, are dependent on what we put in as the funding into our corporate planning system, and that generates all the information on rates, requirement, debt and funding. So normally it just included. Because it's a physical act for finance to actually load things, sorry, that's how I use that word. And just pointing out that overall the Te Manawa-Taki o Te Papa projects have sort of more complicated funding because of the intention that's sat around early decisions on Te Manawa-Taki, which is that it is providing a benefit beyond just the ratepayers of the city, and trying to ensure that the way we fund the development of it and the ongoing operations, that there are contributions from other than Tauranga ratepayers to to that kind of project and amenity. So that's the sort of principle that sits behind it. But I'll cut across now to Susan and let her take you through the details of the paper.
Morning, everyone. So when the 21 to 31 LTPA was adopted, the ratepayer funded debt portion of the Te Manawa programme was capped at $151.5 million and was heavily reliant on external grant funding. Subsequent changes in government policy and external funding availability has meant the funding stack in more recent plans has evolved to leverage other non-rates funded sources, as Catherine mentioned, including asset realisation proceeds, parking management surpluses and airport revenues. Just to be clear, our recommendations in the report today would actually mean the ratepayer funded debt portion for Te Manawa o Te Papa would increase to $167.5 million. Noting, however, that over $30 million worth of contingency budgets remain across the program, some of which may not be required. We're also seeking your agreement today to prepare proposals around philanthropic funding, which we would bring back to Council early 2026 for consideration, and this could again lower that ratepayer funded debt portion of the program. So, happy to take any questions.
Yeah, Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mayor, and good morning, everybody. Just for the listeners at home and my own understanding as well, that's not a deflection. If we utilise the parking surplus and the surplus from the airport activity, both of those surpluses are currently offsetting debt, and so as you've stated before, the net result of that would be that future ratepayers are going to have to pay that back, as it's we're essentially not offsetting the debt anymore. So it's going to offset Te Manawa o Te Papa, and I'm being terribly obtuse. So the revenue currently from the airport and the parking is offsetting debt. If we use that to offset Te Manawa debt, the ratepayer is still kind of picking up the tab, if you get what I mean.
So the net debt that we report, certainly those surpluses reduce that overall net debt. The airport and parking activities are what's called ring-fenced activities. That is, they can build big surpluses up and they will just sit there. So yes, when you report publicly the net debt, that surplus is reducing it, but it is not providing, in that way, a benefit to ratepayers, and that's why traditionally Council has looked at its surpluses as it builds surpluses and said, how should we use that surplus? So the airport surplus has restrictions around how you can use it, and that was the study that said, well, it needs to be for particular benefits. If you don't use it for those, you would have to find a similar natured benefit to use that surplus on. Parking surplus has, I unfortunately can't tell you how we've used the parking surplus in the past, but I know that we have used parking surpluses in the past. It is less restrictive, and again, it's at the decision of Council how you might want to use that surplus rather than retain big surpluses in an activity.
So what happens to the surpluses if we don't use them?
They just stay there and build up.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor Taylor.
Just a question on parking surpluses. So if we go to page 10 of our supplementary agenda, talks option 3, a risk that citywide parking revenues may be seen to be supporting city centre investment only. Whereabouts else in the city do we actually charge for parking, and why wouldn't it apply to the city centre?
So within the parking activity revenue is a fines revenue as well, which is citywide, so there will be parts of the Mount and Gretton that would see fines. And we do have someone from Reese here from parking. Did you want to add anything to that, Reese? Oh, I think that's broken, sorry. Oh, that's good.
Yes, so there is some measure of fine revenue in there that spreads throughout the city, but the fines pay for themselves first and then the rest. The lion's share is city centre revenue at the moment, yeah.
Councillor Crowther, did you have a...
I mean, just to clarify on the previous answer, because I'm thinking of the workshop, and we got clarification from, if I were a former general manager who was very familiar with the project, who confirmed that the tourism Bay of Plenty previously got funding from the airport surplus. So whilst you can put a case that literally it doesn't directly impact the ratepayers, if you take one extra step, it clearly does. And he confirmed it. He said it's precisely right, or words to that effect, that it means that we are now paying through rates funding for something because of Te Manapataki that previously came from the airport surplus. So that was clearly conveyed with Tourism Bay of Plenty at the time, and I happened to be in the room when that was done. So, you know, I think we have to be really careful how we convey this.
So that payment to Tourism Bay of Plenty, as I understand it, was a one-off. It's not their regular operating grant. It was a decision to support a particular initiative for a time, and then there was a decision that, at the time by the commissioners, that the higher priority would be to support Te Manapataki.
Through the chair, like that, the discussion in the room at the time was not that it was one-off, and it was to be a future-focused approach. So that came through from the commissioners, it came through Tourism Bay of Plenty. And if that's not the case, then there was huge confusion from a number of parties around that. And it got conveyed in the discussions in the 2021, in 2022 for the 2021 long-term plan amendment. So you're suggesting it was only a one-off in 2020, and that was the only time that money was to be paid. Because that's certainly not what Tourism Bay of Plenty put in its budget.
Perhaps if I could answer that. So it was for a specific initiative. I think they had funding for about 3 years, but it did have a sunset. Yeah.
Not only was it multi-year, but it was talked about as a long-term strategy. So I think we have to be really clear that decision cut through right in the middle of that. So again, I think we have to be really clear when we're talking about what's debt funded, what's rates funded, etc., that we have to look at a holistic picture of what practically the impact on ratepayers, bearing in mind that the wording in the consultation document was, quote, half of the estimated capital investment of 303 million would be sourced from government grants and this potential sale of non-core council assets, half of it. Now, on the list, can you please confirm I've got government grants, 13 plus the 12.1, which would be included potentially from Waters, which is 25.1, and then we've got now, in terms of the non-core assets, 24.5. So that's nowhere near half. And I'm thinking that's, to me, when we have this discussion, which is good that we're having it, and I thank everyone for bringing it through to the table, but I think that's the basis that it was consulted on, and we need to sort of align our wording to match what the public were consulted on at that time.
I just had a question around that other government grants of 13 million and then the local and community grants, including philanthropic sponsorship. What are those, and are we confident we're going to get those?
No, we're absolutely not confident that we're going to get those. So that table under paragraph 18, that reflects the adopted 2026 annual plan. So what has actually gone into the 27 working draft, it has cleared out most of that external funding other than what we have already received.
Okay, so have we got that, where we're at as it today?
I can provide you those numbers.
Well, that would be great, because that was part of, I guess, one of the reasons for getting this as an item on the agenda is so that the public can actually see where we're at with Te Manawa funding, and so we can understand, because if I was going on those numbers and therefore, we're a little bit on the back foot.
It has basically all been zeroed out, so the other central and local government grants is now nil assumption, and $500,000 assumption for local and community grants and sponsorship, which reflects what we have collected to date. And then it's obviously subject to whatever decision you want to make around philanthropic support in seeking that.
So I think we were around, does that get us back to about that 50 million raise, something like that? Is that 106 comes to mind is left?
So it means that that ratepayer funded debt portion would be 167.5
No.
as part of the funding stack.
Okay.
So can we get that table with an extra column of now, please? That would be useful, and just a printed copy would
Okay,
be great.
we might just leave this to lie right now, and we'll get that information, and then we can come
Can I
back.
just ask 2 questions?
Yeah.
Short ones. So just in terms of airport funding, the 13 million in that table is the profit we make from the airport parking.
No, the 13 million is the amount of debt that the study confirmed could be fairly covered by visitation through the airport over time.
And what does the airport parking make? What is the revenue? What is the net revenue for airport parking and for city parking, central city parking, excluding the Mount?
So revenue sits around almost $20 million, and the surplus is budgeted in the draft 27 annual plan, $8.5 million for airport.
8.5 surplus at the airport, and in the city centre?
For parking?
Yeah.
Parking is this year sitting around $1 million. Yeah, $1 million surplus is assumed this financial year, with that jumping up to 2.3 million in the working draft 27 annual plan.
So just a point of note though, the airport surplus isn't just parking, it's ground lease, landing fees, it's a range of different activities that come together.
So we don't separate parking at the airport?
What we can do, there'll be several ledgers of and sources of income which we can break down, but the parking at the airport isn't considered city parking, it's a revenue stream of the airport, and that is also restricted on what we can spend. It's got to be...
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. It's just when we talk about, when we talk about airport activity funding and we don't know as much as you ladies, it would just be nice to say this is what we make, just to give us a bit of context, just some clarity on that would be terrific. Thank you.
All right, so we're just going to leave this lie on the table. Okay.
Just to cover that one off, as one of my questions was, has parking been excluded from the airport revenue when the assessment was done on this surplus? Because when you think about, when I think about it, I sort of think we're unlikely to have a visitor if someone goes, parks their car there, flies out of town. They're not going to be visiting Te Manawa or Te Papa. So I'm wanting to make sure that when that analysis was done, that no surplus from the parking at the airport was included when you look at the proportion that benefits Te Manawa or Te Papa.
Yeah, I can check that and get back to you.
But
as we discussed, it's a very large surplus, and to support that level of debt is a much smaller would be a much smaller amount of only a portion of the parking surplus, of the airport surplus. So I'm confident that you could exclude it and still have that sufficiency. That study was looking at proportion of visitors likely to participate in amenity of the city. So it wasn't really looking from the point of view how much available revenue, it was looking at what's a fair allocation.
So if we could just get a table, and I think we've already got one somewhere, just basically showing the total budget less the rate funded portion of debt, less the confirmed or expected, and then give us a shortfall, and then we can have a meaningful conversation.
So don't you just want an extra column on that table
No, because it doesn't give us the, I want to see the shortfall clearly. Well, you won't see the shortfall.
Say rates funded debt of whatever it is. Because the balance has to be the shortfall.
Well, I'd just like to see the final number as the shortfall, so they.
That table with the extra columns.
Yeah.
Just for clarity, because there is a decision on the table to use parking surplus, and or that's the one we've operated under for a number of years, to use a parking surplus and the asset realisation, we're not able to produce the draft annual plan until those decisions are made. So we could do.
We'll come back to it today if you can get us the table. If we can have the table now, we'll discuss it. But we don't have the table, so.
Yes, we can get that very quickly.
Yeah. So we'll move on to 11.2, which is annual plan options for rate increases. This is in the supplementary agenda, and it is page 17. Yeah, sorry, we've got a table document as well. You'll note there's part of this, this will come back to that first paper. So we'll deal with that as we get there. We might go back, we'll see how we go.
Okay, so through to you, shall I just provide a...
Oh, yeah, sorry, yes.
Okay.
Just catching up on the table, so.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
So the annual report paper in front of you, annual plan, thank you, paper in front of you, brings you up to date with where we currently are in the working draft, some decisions that we're seeking from Council today, and then the further work that will need to be undertaken. It is year 3 of the long-term plan, but as in all cases, once you get to year 3, there have been significant changes through the first 2 years, and particularly in last year's annual plan, which saw significant changes to external funding, particularly for transportation. It saw changes to the capital program and changes to our operational expenditure from the reset. So those changes have flowed through into the year 3 working draft. At the beginning of the report, we've outlined the Council's updated vision and principles that will guide decision making on the annual plan. And just in context, the very many changes that are happening within the sector that will impact upon year 3, and in particular the discussion on the rates cap, which we're kind of working on the basis it's likely that there will be one, which will continue to create challenges for Tauranga City to deliver the level of infrastructure, and particularly catering for growth. Because growth tends to bring high interest costs, depreciation and operating costs, but a more gradual increase in the population to support that. And the city planning is often rate funded as well. So there are challenges that will come as that works through. The council requested that we look at 3 scenarios. So that was where our working draft landed, taking into account changes that have happened since the LTP, and that's been loaded by our activity managers primarily, and then the executive has looked to bring the rates increase requirement down below that level, and councillors were also interested in a rates increase around sort of 7% mark and also at 4%, what would be the impact on the business of trying to achieve those? So it's actually very challenging to make those scenarios real without decisions coming through from council. So what we've done, and Tracy has a very helpful table that will help take you through the recommendations and how they flow. The executive has looked at changes that are, that could be made, and they are in some ways in the structure of how we deliver things. They're not significantly impacting on levels of service at that stage. We had aimed at the time of the report to say that will be 1 to 1.5% reduction in rates. We have not been able to get there at this stage, but we are looking at something that's closer to about a 0.8% reduction. That's still a work in progress. It will involve negotiation, some areas of consultation and further refinement and clarification in terms of staff in particular. So it is a work in progress and will be something that we would bring to the February decision making. We've also looked at the impact if you brought the capital program down. Again, that's a matter of which items you'd prioritise in or out, and so that will affect in the end the level of rates reduction that could be achieved. But we have given an approximate estimate of what that sort of saving could be. The waters area is an area we've talked about where, to satisfy those sort of forward-looking requirements of the new waters entity and the level of capital investment while retaining the sort of debt metrics, etc., we prepared a water service delivery plan which did see significant increase in the water activity charges, and they are driving part of that overall rates increase. What we have discussed is that when you present your rates bill, when people receive their rates bill, that it does not include volumetric water charges. And in the past, as a council, we've presented the two separately. We started to merge them for simplicity, but when, for example, Jim does his breakdown of impacts on median ratepayers, high, low, etc., they do not include water by metre charges either, because they come through a separate bill more akin to a user charge. So we have presented in the table and in the recommendations an option of focusing the rates increase on those rates and excluding volumetric charging in that metric and what that might look like. We've also looked at if you were to take away the budgeted surplus in that water service delivery plan and just say cover costs only, there's about 10 million of surplus, operating surplus, that's gone into that water services delivery plan as the first of the 10 years of needing to make sure that there's adequate funding in those activities. If you were to change that, there would need to go back to DIA for approval, and it would also affect the balanced budget situation. So again, we'd need to also look at that and potentially go back to LGFA, because a requirement of the borrowing covenant is that you sit at 100% balanced budget. To get to those lower levels of rates increases would require changes in level of service, and we are starting to work through some high-level ideas on that, and we will put together some working information. Obviously, it's all confidential as it's just kind of ideas, but that will be made available to support council decision making in the new year. The capital prioritisation tables, there's been some work done on the prioritisation process as requested. Unfortunately, the capital person's not able to be with us today, so we would aim to send out that report and the way to look at that prioritisation framework next week or later this week, again to support decisions in January. So now I'll just hand across to Tracy, who will sort of talk you through the rates options tables and also any high-level movements in the costs.
Good morning. Just in terms of the report itself, we have given you quite a lot of contextual information. And that includes some of the tables as well. So we haven't at this stage, because it's still very much a working draft, still everything very much moving on a day-to-day basis. We haven't really concentrated heavily on variance analysis. We've shown you what the variances are at that point in time. Just a couple of tables I want to draw your attention to. Table 1, I'm not quite sure what page that is of your agenda. That is a summary, essentially, of our position at that point. These are the metrics that we always present to you in terms of what's the capital program, what is the debt, where does the rate sit, and also the balanced budget figure as well. So we are just very, very slightly under the 100% as it is at the moment. I don't see why, in the fullness of time and everything else being equal, that could not be just over 100% once we have moved through the whole process. Most tables include both 2027 long-term plan for comparison, as well as the 2027 working draft annual plan position. And there's also variances both to that long-term plan and also to the prior year annual plan. So I appreciate that it can take a little bit of concentration to read these tables properly, but we did want to provide that information for you. Table 4 shows the whole of council operating position, noting that other operating expenditure is further broken down into other categories. One category I know that you're particularly interested in is employee expenses, and that is further broken down in Table 5. Perhaps we can spend just a minute or two talking about that table. So the bottom line is that total employee costs show an increase of 11%. But what I'd like to draw your attention to is the middle section of that table, which talks about outliers. So approximately 4% has an offsetting credit in either revenue or other operating costs. So although it's showing as an increase in employee costs, there is an offset elsewhere. So it is not an overall increase, so that's approximately 4%. And there is also another 3%, which is generated by the recalculations that we do for churn and salary savings, and also for capitalised salaries. The actual salary increase that has been budgeted is approximately 3.5%. Moving on to the tabled summary. This was really provided to, I guess, to help you navigate the recommendations of this report and what they mean. So we've got, firstly, what we've called option A, which is essentially not making any adjustment for the water surpluses that are currently carried in the model. Option B looks at how it would look if you separated out volumetric water supply. And option C is how it would look if you reduced those surpluses in the plan. Excuse me. Going down the list on the left is essentially each of the recommendations that are in the report. So it looks at including parking surpluses and asset realisation, as discussed in the prior report. There is an assumption around a reduction of the capital program, and also you have been looking at fees and charges over the last few months, so there is an assumption there that you might find an offset to rates of approximately $1 million. And there are executive savings recommendations to be confirmed, excuse me, of approximately $3 million. And then there is the impact of how you treat the waters. So that's a summary of, excuse me, where we sit at the moment and how the recommendations will impact that position.
Thank you. I have a question on paragraph 66D, which talks about depreciation and how they've outstripped expectations. I'm just trying to understand that, because it says, capitalisation of 116 million in places and spaces. This drives a year-on-year increase in depreciation of 7.5 million in this activity. Get all that, but why have we not expected that? Because it's Memorial Park to City Centre pathway, waterfront playground, Elizabeth Street's streetscape, Masonic Park upgrade, Homeru indoor courts, and so were none of those things in the long-term plan, and so we didn't expect to deliver them. Is that?
They were definitely all in the long-term plan. The differences lie around essentially two things. One is the point of capitalisation. So our general assumption when we're planning is that we will experience depreciation in the year after we've basically finished paying for it. So the year after capitalisation, we make that assumption. What we've experienced in the last year or two particularly is that as part of the audit process, but also as part of our internal processes as well in terms of capitalisation, which have got a lot better, is that capitalisation is actually occurring the year earlier than we had planned for. So that's one impact. The other impact is around the estimated useful life. So when we are planning, the planning system doesn't, well, it does allow us to componentise an asset should we choose to, but that's a level of detail that, in my view, planning systems are probably not best suited to. At the time of planning a project, the componentisation there would be some high-level assumptions, but probably not super accurate. So we just average. We average the useful life expected. So when we end up capitalising it, it's done at a component level with much more accuracy, and there can be some differences there as well.
Questions?
It really worries me when, you're our technical accountant and depreciation happens according to the rules, like when the asset has been built, or in the case of software, you can actually depreciate when you're partway through a build of some software. So for quite a big change to happen now when we've got good systems and good people, it really worries me, and whether we've got a planning system that's good enough to be doing it itself or we need some help. It concerns me that this is coming up in 2025 as quite a significant change on the annual plan we're looking at, the draft annual plan we're looking at, 26-27. Just from it starts making me concerned about our technical capability across the organisation when this sort of thing happens.
Yes, it isn't desirable, and agree. There was a real focus on making sure that it was all brought up to date, and the just the timing of those very large places and spaces investments all coming through in 1 year, and somehow getting missed in the corporate planning system. Yes, it isn't desirable, I agree with you, and it is something that we're focusing on. We have very good people sitting in the asset area now, and I think we'll get very good communication through of what's sitting in that, and it is something we're aware we'll have to be more conscious of in the corporate planning system, that we don't have stuff sitting in work in progress that's going to surprise us.
So was this raised by external audit as an issue that we have had to resolve? Because this is quite a big, yeah, that sounds quite a big issue.
It wasn't this year, but it's part of re-resourcing into that. Was raised 2 to 3 years ago, so we actually had to resource up our asset team because it was struggling, and the audit did raise that. So it's just, we've just been working through that, and we do have much improved systems now, and very good staff in there.
And so what system is our asset register on? Digital system?
In terms of the financials, it is in SAP, but the componentisation, the very, very detailed part of it, is held in separate systems. It's held in RAM, Excel, and there might be one more. But those are reconciled at each annual report.
And the planning system is separate again?
Yes, it is, yeah.
And that could go on SAP as well? Why is the componentisation not in SAP? Because SAP should do reasonably good asset registers and depreciation calculations and planning.
So the level of detail required in the asset management systems for renewals of kind of quite detailed componentry would be far too complex for your financial accounting system. So we hold the data at a much higher level.
You could put in an SAP an asset register that does all of those calculations.
Well, I believe we have them, but what you have, when we get the reval done, it's done through those detailed asset systems at quite a low level, and then it's taken through, those balances are updated in the higher level asset system, which then drives into the PP&E note, which, as you know, is at quite a high level.
Could I have an action, please, that I just would like a one-pager on what systems we have for our asset register, our revaluations, our depreciation, our planning, and just to understand, I want to know what systems they're on and at what each of those systems does, because this really concerns me.
Councillor Currat and then Councillor Crowther.
Now, on the waters topic and the shift from rates or from user fees into rates. Now, I think the comment was it was done for simplicity. But when you look at it, and over my years on council, it always has been reported separately, like there's a rate line, and just below that there's user fees. There's clearly a user fee, the volumetric fee, the volumetric. But, previously the set annual cost was reported into rates, and I can understand that. So can I dig a bit deeper in terms of the logical reasoning behind shifting that? Surely it wasn't simplicity, because that doesn't sort of make sense.
Simplicity in the sense that we are required to report volumetric water as a rate through our financial statements, not as a user fee. Even though you and I both know that you can actually impact whatever you are charged for water by changing your volume usage. So that is actually a requirement. So I think that over time the two were brought into alignment because it seemed clearer. However, as you say, it is to all intents and purposes a user fee.
So that requirement had been in place for quite some time, and we weren't consistent with the requirement, but then suddenly we thought we'd better come into line and report it that way, which seemed different to what logic would require. So, yeah. Okay, it just helps understand the switch potentially back to the previous regime, which would be then not consistent with the requirement. But the option is there, obviously. Is that correct?
It just requires a few more lines in that key financials just to explain it so people can add back who are saying, hang on, this rates number says 368, why are you now working it out on 330 something? And it just requires that extra line.
Which could have been done before. Okay.
I had a couple of topic areas. One was the waters. So we put, well not we, but council put through a higher increase in the wastewater targeted rate than the LTP in the first and second year of the LTP, and put through the same as the LTP in the first year, but round numbers, 1 million less in the second year. So that second year is on us. I'm sort of struggling to understand the recommendations in the context that last year, you might recall, I was had a number of questions around, are we actually putting enough funding towards water in particular and waters in general? And we are, for stormwater, I believe we're about sort of neutral. Wastewater, we've sort of put in more, but the water we've put in less. So it's sort of, I guess it just seems we're just sort of swapping them over, and then we're sort of trying to then retrospectively sort of work it through. So this year we have a lower looking rates increase, it looks to me, because the whole thinking from the government, as I understand it, as articulated by the Minister, was that there will be a phase-in of rates, caps and requirements, and part of the delay that he stated through the media was to allow for a transition to where councils implement their water, their water plans, and then separate out waters. Until then, it wasn't explicitly stated by the Minister, but it seemed to me an obvious inference that he was saying, well, you just keep it as a rates increase, and then once you push the button on your plan, you then separate it out. And I just think we seem to be moving to do this. I'm wondering, what is the thinking behind this? Why are we, when we tried to tease this out last year to try to future-proof against this, we now sort of have a recommendation that seems to be saying let's separate it, and I'm really struggling with that. Where did this come from, I guess?
I guess we're just trying to provide council with choices about how you want to present the information. I think if you separate out the volumetric charge, it's a user fee, and you still talk about that increase, but you explain that, which is a very large increase, but you explain that increase in its context rather than kind of buried within the higher level, just all the rates and what they're doing. So it just gives you an opportunity, but it is a choice of council.
The other question is to the Deputy Mayor's point. If I sort of flip that the other way, what is it we need to not have this happen again? Do we need a faster transition to SAP? Do we need more resourcing into digital? Do we need more resourcing into staff? Because it has been a multi-year issue for the council, and it does have huge impacts when it comes to looking at the rates, and it doesn't allow governance, certainly in one particular year I'm thinking, it didn't allow governance to have enough visibility of what the impacts of the depreciation would be and the ongoing impact. So what is it that, from a finance team point of view, that would mean, because you talked about needing to get resources, have you got enough? Do you need more? And what do you need?
It is about, a lot of the detail of finance is about resourcing, and it's one of the risks with the reset and with any reduction, and it's not just across finance, that when you have a reduction, then you have less opportunity to delve deep, to check, and it's always been probably an area where we have under-resourced, and we have made sure we've got an extra resource in to support this year, and very strong management in there, and a person who can connect across into the corporate planning as well. So it is about people and resource, I agree, and we are doing our best to make sure that we avoid problems in the future.
I guess I would like to add to the action point, if my colleagues agree, to have not only report back on what the Deputy Mayor wanted, but to report back on options to adequately resource that area, because I don't feel I've had visibility of what's needed. We've had a reset, and we approved a reset, and that's fine, but we didn't go department by department. We didn't know who was leaving the organisation or anything like that. So to actually understand if there are now gaps after the reset that are significant, we could at least have that option as part of that report.
Yeah, I think we'll review this particular aspect of it. I don't know that the reset can necessarily, this is attributed to that reset. I think this was more a systems thing and ensuring that the information flowed through in sufficient time for us to understand the impact of depreciation. But we'll review that aspect of it. So
respectful point of order, Mayor.
Yep.
Can you or someone just provide me with clarity on the difference between an action for staff and a decision we need to make via resolution? I'm just a bit confused now with us just saying, can we make things an action? Because whilst I can hear what Glenn's saying, it feels real operational and perhaps with the level of detail that requires needs a resolution. Otherwise, we're effectively just asking staff for any old thing we want. And perhaps, not that, but just in general, when we do it, we're jeopardising the credibility of democracy. So can we just, what is the real difference at its core?
I think an action is really a request for information, and it's not it's kind of one step below us, putting it in a resolution, and then it's a formal action, an action point. So, Councillor Morris.
Thank you. Just in regard to Resolution D and the need under the Water Services Delivery Plan to generate a surplus to be sustainable, would that be higher or lower depending on Council's decision in March around whether, go to a CCO or are in-house?
So the decisions were based on the model. So the model, and I guess it's the process of that water service delivery plan, wasn't considered in the context of an annual plan, so I'm aware of that. And over time, there does need to be an increase in resource, in funding for waters. So the model basically tried to smooth that so that the increases happened commencing in this annual plan year. So and they were based on ring-fenced financials primarily, so they won't make a difference because the ring-fenced was TCC only, other council only, and then we combined the two, but the smoothing was done within the TCC modelling.
So that was regardless of, thank you.
Councillor Baker.
Morena no kia tātou. I'm looking at section 46, page 25, and quite curious to know a bit more about the two bottom sections in that table there. So the will be committed by June 26 and the uncommitted, which is a combined total of about 144 mil. That to me seems like a real opportunity for us to find savings and reduced impacts on financial impact on our residents. The latter point talks to the prioritisation framework or the draft prioritisation framework. It's probably been jigged up a few times with everything that's been going on. Is that available for us to look at currently, or do the current resolutions enable staff and leadership to really dig into that and bring back meaningful options for us to consider through the next annual plan or long-term plan?
No, so the spreadsheet has been built so that councillors can have a look at the prioritisation. It was intended to be presented today. Unfortunately, there's been an illness, so we're not able to do that today. I'm not sure if that got sent to you. It was due to be tabled today. It may have been sent urgently. Oh, no, this is a newer version, that actual request you wanted to...
Yeah, there's a fresh one will come for summer reading for council. It should be, as Catherine said, it'll be available next week.
But we have had a previous version with all
that's
those
right.
projects.
And there's only slight changes to the question of the opportunities in the table. So what staff will present at a workshop after the paper comes through is it will be analysis of ways to reduce the CapEx program, including those two rows that you've identified. It'll be a combination of reducing some of those budgets rather than removing the program, but also being more proactive and optimising some of the projects. The question will be about deferrals, which projects to defer, and that's where the prioritisation methodology. Usefully at city delivery, there was a prioritisation matrix for small projects agreed, so that gives us a good launch pad into the workshop in probably February now to finalise.
Yeah, I guess just on that, I think renewals is still an opportunity. I think we don't just assume that everything in renewals is going to get done, because that's a big chunk. So just like to have a look at that. And then again, just, again going forward, we'd like to see the contingency separated out whenever we're talking about capital programs, so we can understand it as a net and a gross number, because that has a significant impact. In this case, we're talking about 49 million in contingency funds. So if we actually produced all our projects without using contingency, we'd be halfway there to the cut. Obviously, that's not necessarily the contingencies there for a reason, but if we actually looking at it, we should be able to look at it like that. Councillor Schuler.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for the report. Just a bit of clarification following on from Councillor Morris. It's around the waters and the need for, I think it's paragraph 23 on page 21 it refers to. So the significant revenue increases need to be done to meet the financial requirements for waters. So if we did try, and that, I mean, looking at that number, the 10 million, or you're looking about 2.5% of difference in rates caps, whether you go to the top or the bottom. But if we don't start in 26, 27, it effectively means that we'll have to have higher rates over, you've got to divide it over 9 years, doesn't it?
Yes, I think there is opportunity to phase it in a different way. I don't think, it was just the way the model was built, and it didn't sort of become evident to this process until we kind of delved in. But there is certainly opportunity to phase it more gradually, and it is a lever we have, yes. And from TCC's point of view, absolutely, it's an option. And then from the combined point of view, where it is tight in those early years, there are a number of councils that have CCOs that are given a few years to reach those FFOs. So again, that's a waters discussion rather than annual plan, but yeah, there is opportunity to change that.
And then the next one, just following on the renewals discussion. I remember last time we talked, there was sort of an initial prioritisation, I think, around, there was a sort of a percentage of renewals versus new. Is that, am I remembering correctly? And then is that same sort of logic being applied? Because the question is, I suppose, with renewals, obviously we can have a look at some stuff, but at some point you start impacting levels of service quite significantly. So I very much appreciate staff will be aware of it, but have we got a sort of a high level number of where we're seeing those renewals versus new projects set? Or?
Yeah, so it actually flows from the asset management process. So sometimes renewals can be quite high when there's large assets that need to be renewed. And you'll remember Natalia's workshop talked about this is how it comes through the system, and they model it. And yeah, but you can look at the extent to which you may want to be tougher on that renewal. I think those kind of renewals are, it won't be huge dollars that you can squeeze out, but it is something we can certainly look at and provide information on.
Councillor or Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Mahe, and loving table 4, thank you. So just in terms of that, and I think I would, so automatically we'll look at total costs for the draft annual plan versus the total cost for the annual plan, and we're 33 million more, but 29 million of that is depreciation and finance costs. Finance expenses at 83.1 versus LTP for next year of 80. I understood our debt was lower and interest rates are probably less than we expected, lower than we expected them to be. So can I just get an explanation of that 3 million more and quite a lot more than the annual plan?
Hi, so within the finance costs is now the interest expense for the 90 Devonport Road finance lease. So the majority of the comparison for 2027 LTP to 2027 annual plan will be that operating lease that got converted to a finance lease, which has a, I think it's $2.5 to $3 million interest expense that gets...
Can you tell me what that is? Is it 2.5?
That's the amortisation, and then there's a
But that means that therefore that cost is no longer in. It would have. Where would it have been before?
It will have been taken out of other operating expenditure, and it will be split across finance expense and depreciation.
So table 6
4.4
shows that
million.
impact.
Yeah, 4.4 million is the lease liability interest, and then amortisation, which goes effective into depreciation, 2.6.
So 2.6 is the amount that's what wasn't in the long-term plan, but it is in our plan.
No, it's just where it's switched.
They're now nodding, Mahe.
Okay.
I was nodding because it's gone into the finance expense line.
And what's the amount that, if I'm looking at the difference between the 83 and the 80, sorry, is that right? No, 80.9 and 83.1, how much of that is the...
4.4 million.
4.4.
4.4. So if you look at table 6 in your report, that's sort of tried to break it out for you. So you've got what was in the LTP as property rental, and what now is sitting in the annual plan is lease and amortisation, which will sit under
I didn't
that.
understand that table very well, so I
All
just
right,
went back
okay.
to my table 4 because I like that one. And so which line is it not in? That 4.4 million is not in the LTP, and which line? Where would the normal lease have been?
So in table 4, it is not in the property rental and lease expenses. So you can see there's a 5.7 million negative variance there.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, Councillor Crowther.
Why is it unfunded amortisation at 1488? I can't remember that.
The unfunded item is to reflect the fact that the finance lease expenditure in the earlier years, the total expenditure is a great deal higher than the actual lease cost, than the operating lease costs. So we pay out the agreed operating lease, but the financial lease calculation is close to $1.5 million higher than that. There is no need to fund that, so we reflect it as unfunded.
Timing issue. You got another question?
Just back to the waters. I'm just trying to sort of decode some of the, so in 23 it says that the water services delivery plan identified significant revenue increases commencing in 26-27 through 10 years to meet financial requirements for waters. And then it says under 42, surpluses were generated under the plan, commencing in this coming year to maintain strong financial metrics. But I'm still stuck on the point that we don't need the money to spend, we need it to create a surplus. And I'm still struggling with this thing where it says, I mean, the argument seems to be the proposed change to water revenue would aggravate the unbalanced budget position, but that's only if we let it. So to me, it's almost like that's a red herring. We won't let that happen. Well, I don't think there's a mood to let that happen. So then the question fundamentally boils down, and correct me if you think I'm missing something, but doesn't it just boil down to, do we want to extract that money from the people of Tauranga this year when it's to go into a surplus situation to build up a bit of a, a bit of a nest egg for what will end up being the waters organisation, or do we want to let them keep their money this year but have a bigger increase at some point in the future when the money's needed to flow through as OPEX. Have I understood that correctly?
Yes, you could make a decision in that waters entity about whether you say, well, actually, council's decision is to slow down the accounting for surplus in the waters activities. When we've held it in-house, we've usually aimed not to build a surplus, just to cover costs. It's a cash balance activity, and we aim to set a price that covers expenditure, and that's how councils normally work. The waters activities are heavily indebted and have driven a lot of councils' debt in the past, and that's been okay when you've got a wider debt pool, and it becomes a lot more visible when you are going into a separate waters entity and a CCO that has a limit, albeit a very high limit, that they're close to that. And so, as I say, the model was just one proposal for how you might do it and how much surplus you might build, and there'll be a number of other ways in which you can do the same thing. They will affect your FFO ratio, and again, that is more a waters discussion than it is an annual plan discussion. We're just trying to bring that awareness here, and depending on how you wish to present the options for next year, that's an option for you to consider, whether you would take on that change to the water service delivery plan, which will have impacts because it's been adopted as it is, or whether you just want to give that awareness to the community of what you've done.
Yeah, have to.
Kia ora. Changing tact a little bit, and last question from me. I'm looking at the draft recommendation F. Can I get some clarity from any of the staff in the room? Is that saying that at that 10th of February meeting, we will be making decisions to reduce level of service or not? And if it is, or isn't rather, how much of a pain would it be to turn that conversation into a consultation exercise with community, because reaching somewhere near 4% requires quite a significant permanent reduction in service that our people may not be prepared for until it's gone. So it might be a valuable exercise to do, but I'm conscious that it's December, this decision is in February. Is it realistic and of value to have that community consultation and engagement on that matter?
We'd be looking at options to go out to consultation. Yeah, so the February meeting will decide on I think that's the plan, is to go out with 3 different options, and people can decide what they prefer best. Right, yeah, Councillor.
So further to my calculation again on table 4, so we've got an increase in cost of 33 million. 29 is interest and finance, but we take 4.4 out because that's been reclassified. So we've still got an 8 million increase in costs from 26 to 27. We've said to our CCOs that we want to say, okay, we would ask that you don't increase your costs. We're not increasing the grant. So whether it's an action here or it will be an action at our finance working group, is that I would like to know what additional, what are we getting for the additional 8 million in expenses, Marty? So it's just it's not a zero budgeting, but it's saying if we didn't increase our costs, what have we increased our costs? What's made up that 8 million of increased in cost? And I know we talked yesterday at the delivery committee with City Ops, and we talked about your changes. The reset has realigned some areas, and they are going to work. They're going to be better aligned, so hopefully there's some savings. We heard there were some transport savings already. We heard a project that we liked at Aspen Reserve that's less than budget, which means there's a budget. So I would like to have an option, certainly for February, of that we're not increasing our costs, so that 8 million, that our executive look at an 8 million reduction in costs by saying we'll keep the level of cost the same as the current year plan.
All right, is that all the questions on this paper?
So is that an action, or do I taken that to the finance working group, or what?
Yeah, I think that's going to be an action. Yeah. Susan, I just wonder if that table was correct. Okay. Because I think it would be good to go back to the. You've emailed? Oh, okay, yeah. Sweet. Yeah, so we'll go back to that original item. I just had one question before we start. Do we know the approximate interest rate of the IFF? Had we locked that in? It was over 7%, but
Sorry, I can't tell you off the top of my head. Was it over 7 or would have been high 6s if not over 7?
I think it was mid-7s.
Mid-7s,
It was like swaps plus 2.5 or something.
Okay.
But, yeah.
So Sherry can just check that.
All right, so is there any questions? Oh, had we just funded it through IFF? Yeah. Yep.
So we're on item 1?
Yeah.
Just to make sure. In the report, it indicated that the parking revenue would fund the interest, if I'm reading the report correctly. But you're not proposing. So initially it was going to be 46 million, and that was going to repay the debt over a period of 30 years or whatever the number of years, and it was going to pay the interest as you went through. So that 46 million could justifiably be put as a commitment to the project capital funding, and would take care of that share of the OPEX on that portion of the debt. But now the 22 million, which is the sort of realistic amount, that is just to pay the interest. So I guess I'm wondering why we're still including it as part of the capital funding, because all we're doing is just paying the interest, according to if I read that report correctly.
Yes, so the projected uplift in revenue is sitting around $1 million once all the Te Manawataki buildings are complete in the city centre. That is obviously subject to some fairly aggressive uplift in pricing that was built into the LTP. So the recommendation was that to keep that rates benefit flowing through this annual plan is to, at a bare minimum, be funding this interest. So it is about to match the $1 million. We would be maxing out the debt at 22 million in the activity, and if the revenue actually did generate over and above that, we could then be using those funds to retire the debt as well. That's sitting in that parking activity reserve. It's just, it was there as an option to say, rather than loading up the parking activity with this insurmountable amount of debt, that it was actually going to end up with capitalising interest on it in the parking activity reserve. It was going to be over $100 million that was going to be a burden on that activity.
No,
so it was just to give another option to you around flexibility and so that you can make the call on pricing strategies a little more freely.
But to the point that the right-hand column on, and I mean, anyone who's listening to the meeting won't see it, but there's a column which says funding stack with some other numbers. That 22 million is not, like, we haven't got that, in the sense that we might end up getting 10 million from the government for something, but it's not included in that column of the table because we haven't got it. We've put in 22 million, which the only way we'll get that is to, as I understand, is to increase the charging more than has been the case in Tauranga's history, and to take a different model to parking in the CBD, and we kind of know the political implications of that. So it just seems like a risky approach to a funding stack that's meant to give us the sort of, I thought that column was sort of the solid, what we've got in the bank, so to speak. Meaning either that it's physically here or that it's that's a very solid, planned piece of capital that we can access. And I think the airport, I can understand that's a long history of having a certain revenue flow with a certain level of surplus. And notwithstanding what I said earlier, which I think is important to acknowledge, that it's still at our discretion to utilise that for this purpose. But the parking, I think, we just need a change of council, and they could say, well, let's just do free parking in the CBD to try and attract people to Te Manawataki. And I think it's dangerous to have it in that column unless I'm misunderstanding something. Yeah, so I guess that's a question. What is the justification for putting it in this?
I guess putting that 22 million in the funding stack in that way is it does set up a reserve in that is getting drawn down to the tune of 22 million over the next 2 years to fund this new capital, so that we don't have that ratepayer impact. And then it is very visible in that activity to know how much debt needs to get paid back over a certain period of time. So if it doesn't get included in that funding stack and it's a just wait and see, we're going to lose all of that storytelling potentially between
I'm
change
aware
of
of that,
governance.
yeah. I mean, I'm not so worried about that. I'm worried about whether we actually get the money. The other part of it is the asset realisation reserve, which in the report we had reduced it to 20, I've forgotten the number now, 24.5 was it? But now in this spreadsheet we're back up again at 55.4 for asset realisation reserve, and we seem to be sort of zipping around the place on that. I'm just wondering what the thinking is behind that.
That was just the balancing game between asset realisation and parking management needed to make up a combined value, what was it, like 60 odd million. So it was just the split that came through the last model, and then looking at the asset revaluation list of properties, that up to 55.4 million is what could be achieved. And these are just, and so that far right column that I've provided you there, those are all our recommendations. But if you wanted to load up parking with the 46 million per the that KPMG report that supported that.
To my colleagues, my personal view would be to have a column there which was just a more conservative column, which just said until we make a proactive decision around something, then it's in the rates funded debt pile. To me, that would be a much sounder approach. And if we get a government grant, or we get philanthropy, or we get more parking revenue than business as usual, if I put it that way, and same with asset realisation, I think the approach taken in the paper was actually good because it seemed a more realistic approach. And now we've gone back to the higher number just to balance it. And I sort of think we almost need another column now, which is the sort of the conservative financial approach column.
We'll just get the resolution, recommended resolution put up. So I'm going to move this resolution and I'm going to remove B2, 3 and 4. Sorry, this is on page 4 of the supplementary. Yep. Yep.
So my question relates to point F. I'm just trying to rack my brains as to why you've put that in there, because a lot of that stuff has absolutely nothing to do with Te Manawa-Taki. It's to do with roads and waters, and do we want to put the Wairiki pump station into that amount as well? I can't quite understand why it's in the resolution, other than to point out that Te Papa's possibly getting more than its fair share, but I don't know that that's been a fair comparison. So,
Yes, and it did come about as a result of, there was a request by one of the councillors to provide some of this information to understand how the 306 capital program related to the rest of the program, and so it was really just there as a showing you for completeness. It was, not intended for anything.
It's a bit of a misdirection that I don't think should be in there, so I'd ask
we
for
could
that to be removed.
take that.
Okay.
Yeah, happy to move that with F out as well. The note, it could be in the report, but it's not, doesn't need to be resolution. So if I've got a seconder, I'll talk to the reasoning for that. Yeah, Councillor Crowther will second. So this is how I see it. We've continually talked about keeping it simple by saying, oh, we're making money over here, we're going to shift it over here, and we're going to pay off debt here, but ultimately, the ultimate result is, someone ends up paying. And, should the people parking to use the city centre be paying for Te Manawa-Taki? Should the people at the airport be paying to use Te Manawa-Taki? Look, I am happy if we get a massive uplift in people parking in the city and we get a massive uplift at the airport once this happens, that we put some of those funds towards Te Manawa-Taki. But at the moment, we're saying, we're just going to shift money from here and we're going to put it here, and that all is all happy families. At the end of the day, right now we've got a $106 million shortfall, and that is extra money that the ratepayer, there was a commitment that they wouldn't be paying that. Right now, as it stands, they are going to pay that. Now, I'm quite comfortable standing behind that because it's transparent. They know what they're paying for. It's not that the parkers are paying for Te Manawa-Taki. It's that, that Te Manawa-Taki is paying for Te Manawa-Taki when the rates get raised. They know what they're paying for. Now, a couple of things on that. As I say, if there is uplift, we can look at that. I do support the asset realisation reserve being used, because that's basically asset recycling. We're saying we're selling assets that we're not using and we're putting it back into Te Manawa-Taki. We're making a conscious decision to do that. Got no problem with that. We've already resolved that that's the net proceeds, so that's fine with me. Secondly, interestingly, if you do the maths and you assume that, let's say it was 7%, was where we were going to fund Te Manawa-Taki ratepayer debt. Today it's at 4.5% is where we're at. So if you do the maths on that at full drawdown, that one decision can fund $84 million. So the ratepayer can fund an extra $84 million of debt with no cost to them. That was what they were going to pay, and now they're going to pay. So if we do that maths, we're $22 million short. So, if we look at it like that, being completely open and transparent, the ratepayers at the moment are $22 million worse off than under the original sort of proposal. So you know, that to me is something we can close that with the asset realisation, I believe. And then, you know, I'm quite comfortable that, you know, that they're going to be in a sort of net zero position. If we can find other money, fantastic, because, you know, the less that is funded by the ratepayer, the better. But, you know, I think we've just got to be very open, transparent. Let's not be complicated and try to say, well, we're going to move this money here and there and everywhere, and therefore you're not really paying when you are really paying. You know, it was the same with the Marine Precinct. You know, to not fund that debt and then say, oh, well, actually, you know, you're paying less for Te Manawa-Taki, but you're paying more for debt over here. That's just a misnomer. At the end of the day, everyone's paying, but the ratepayer is still paying. So that's my direction. Keep it simple and make it, you know, and be very transparent with our people as to what's happening, and let's try to close that gap as much as we can. But ultimately, the gap at the moment, as I see it, is about 22 million difference to where we would have been had we funded this with IFF. So that's Glenn. You want to...
Completely agree. I think it's a great idea to keep it simple. I think it fits as I read out before, the initial consultation with our public was to source money from government grants and potential sale of non-core council assets. I completely agree with the Mayor that the asset realisation, after it pays back debt, the net amount can pay this off. And I guess to me the rest of it was just a bit of a distraction. I don't know why the council spent, you know, 3 years working through a whole lot of complexity when it could have just listened to what the public said at those workshops that some of us were at, and the various hui. And I think it accurately conveys the picture now. What it also does is it gives an opportunity for the philanthropists in our city to step up. The wealthy people in this city were the people who were calling for this project more than anyone. Sure, there were the arts and culture people, but primarily it was a bunch of wealthy people who were putting pressure on council for, I don't know what year it started, but decades, but certainly over the last decade, and they came up with plans, and we've got layers and layers of governance to try to make sure it all went through financially, and I don't think it was a good result financially, but now that it's happening, we need to make sure that, number one, the ratepayer contributes as little as possible, because they're already on the hook for well over half, no matter how well it all proceeds. But I think the time is right to sort of come up with the other part of the resolution, to come up with an approach that is going to try and enlist the support of all the people in the city to support this project, because now we've got it a bit clearer in terms of how it really is being funded. We can go out there and say, hand on heart, we've done our best to make it simple, we've done our best to sort of get the costs down, we're still working it through on the Civic Plaza. But those decisions were made last year. We all had our own views on it, but we need to pull together and actually go to those people and say, you're the people who said you're going to back it, you're the ones who wanted us to go ahead, and you were quite confident in that consultation. They were saying, some of those people were saying publicly that the ratepayers would only have to foot half the bill. So if that's the case, they need to stump up with some money and put their money where their mouths were for year after year after year. And they need to support us to get funding through all their connections that are far better connected than we are to the government, to other philanthropy sources. And we need to all come together as a community and make sure that we can actually fund this properly, and then we'll have enough money to go and do some of the other things in that long-term plan. I do think maybe the reason, Rod, that the list was provided, well, firstly, I'll take the opportunity to say that it proves me correct when I said in the election campaign, and I've still got the bullet wounds from where I was shot down, that there was $1 billion and more going into the centre of the city. And I think this, over a 10-year period, and I think this certainly, I underestimated the amount. But secondly, the community stadium is in there at the Tauranga Domain. I think Councillor Taylor and I are of a like mind that we can probably extract that 90 million out of the out of the $1.25 billion that's going into the city centre. And so I stick by my view. There was $1 billion going in there. A lot of those decisions have been baked in, some of them have not. But the bigger point is we need to actually, now that we've clarified the funding and the financing, we need to actually get out to those people and everyone use their connections to try and pull in some funding.
Councillor Morris and then Councillor Gurat.
Thank you, Mayor. I support the resolution and the changes to the recommendation that you and the seconder have put on the table for us. This has all been a bit of trigonometry to me. So I do remember there were all sorts of things happening just before the election to box off decisions that the democratically elected council could make. One of those was that the Crown Commission were trying to lock us into IFF, and it was only the saving of a couple of coalition partners who ensured that that decision was made by the elected Tauranga City Council. And I just reflect on the fortune of that decision being made at central government level, and want to thank those coalition partners, because we wouldn't be able to say that that $3.5 million a year saving would be able to offset anything if the Commission had had its way. And just on the government and philanthropic funding shortfall, I reflect back on the Audit New Zealand report to the Commissioners on the long-term plan, in which they say on page 4, and I quote, "Council notes that the civic precinct program could be reduced to fit within available funding." And that was a refrain that was repeated often. And that's what was told to the community in the 2022 long-term plan amendment. So on the one hand, you've got this statement to Audit New Zealand and our community, which I think sounds misleading, because on the one hand you've got a commission that was doing its best to bind an incoming council and its decisions, so much so that the decision we made this time last year, in my view, and I respect there are a couple of colleagues who disagree with me, was really a Hobson's choice. The sunk cost and the ongoing cost to ratepayers of reprogramming and resequencing that was unpalatable to me. It could have been worse. If I reflect on the fact that the Commission was trying to bind the council again on the memorial pool. They tried to blimmin' order the hydroslides and store them on Memorial Park, and it was only the Te Manawataki o Te Papa board that prevented them from doing that. So I've learned two things about transparency and accountability in New Zealand through observing the Commission's decisions at the end of their term, is that you can give a narrative that is untethered from the truth to Audit New Zealand, and two, Audit New Zealand doesn't care, because they were asked by government MPs to look into this and they chose to close their eyes, and that's unfortunate. You know, we look at banana republics around the world and we go, hey, we're better than that. We look to organisations like Transparency International and say, hey, we're better than that. Oh, Anne Tolley's the chair of Transparency International, funnily enough. And we say, we're better than that. But look what's happened. We close our eyes.
Councillor Kurak.
Full marks, Mahe. That approach will be appreciated by this community around the transparency, because I've always had an issue with the way this has been designed to make the project more palatable with the community. And Steve, you mentioned the term trigonometry. You know, I was going to use the term like shady labelling, because at the end of the day, you know, we're taking some surpluses from the airport activity and the parking activity, which are operational surpluses, moving it from the P&L into the balance sheet and a label there, and offsets external debt and all that. But, you know, the obvious transparent approach is just take on new debt if you have to, and treat it like anything else. I mean, to label little chunks here and there is not transparent. So, Mahe, good on you. I totally support that shift. I hope the staff take it on board, and let's do this a little bit more differently, make it totally transparent, and move forward on that basis. And I think our external funders would appreciate that. Around the asset realisation, or asset, whatever term you use for them, you know, there are others that have expressed this comfort there, but, you know, I campaigned on not selling our assets, so I can't unfortunately support that. But in terms of this project, which I didn't support, but moving forward, I'd like to see it done in a proper, transparent fashion, and me Mahe is delivering that today.
Councillor Roseboom.
Thanks, Mayor. Now, going back to when we initially agreed to proceed with this project, we agreed to include parking and parking funds in the project. I looked at it as an opportunity for us to capture outside funding, people from outside the region. It's not only Tauranga ratepayers that park in the city centre, it's Western Bay and general wider from the North Island population. It's not only Tauranga ratepayers that park at the airport, it is the region that use the airport. So it's an opportunity for us as a city to capture extra funding outside of our rater base to support a development that's a benefit to the region. So I cannot support the removal of 2, 3 and 4.
Anyone else want to speak on this? Councillor Schuller?
Yeah, I'm with Councillor Roseboom on this, and I do understand clearly, and I totally agree with the concepts where we're talking about the openness and transparency. You go back to the intent and the vision and what we're trying to achieve here. We're obviously tied, and we need to be right down here deciding what the dollars and cents are. We're still creating an amazing asset for the city, and through a lot of reasons that have happened that aren't entirely in our control, the funding landscape has changed, and it would be wonderful, you know, with the regional deal discussions we're having, if we could find a few $1 million to support. But I do accept and I do agree that we need to tell the public where we sit at the moment, and that this is the level. And I do agree with Councillor Crowther that it is a good opportunity to unify the other people that may be able to show their interest in the support and put their money where their mouth is, as you say. But I think we can do those things as well as still provide use the airport and the parking in the right way to support this. I don't think we lose transparency by doing that. So I will be sitting in with Councillor Roseboom on this one. But we can be transparent and we can still rationally and make good choices about how we use those funds.
Any other discussion? If there's no further discussion, then happy to wrap up. I hear what both Councillor Schuller and Councillor Roseboom has said. We're not limiting that people outside are paying for this. It's just that they're using the airport and they're using the car parking building and they're paying us that way. And to then sort of put it in as one, I think, you know, potentially you can drive perverse outcomes, because if the parking revenue drops, then, you know, what are you going to do? Put the parking up more because you need to fund the debt that funds Te Manawataki. So, you know, I think you just separate out the activities. As I said before, if uplift occurs in those activities, we can relook at it and say, you know, that actually Te Manawataki is driving additional parking revenue or additional airport revenue, and therefore we think that they should contribute towards the activity. I'm very open to that, but to have the people that are driving into the CBD right now to work and paying for their parking to then that is paying for Te Manawa. I'm not sure that's a fair outcome. You know, the other part of this is, you know, we've got to continue to drive this project and make sure we deliver it on time and under budget. And if we can deliver you know, there's still a significant amount of contingency in this project, and if we can deliver that with leaving as much untouched, that's going to take that delta down even further as to what's rate funded money. So, you know, that is certainly still the challenge, is we want this delivered as effectively and efficiently as we can, and there's a big opportunity there from a contingency perspective. And if you added that with some asset realisation, if those things all came in, then, you know, we're going to start to reduce that debt even further. So I'm happy now to put the recommendations as up on there as to council, and ask all those in favour. Aye, and please raise your hands. Those against? Councillor Schuler, Councillor Roseboom. So that is carried. That is done. So we'll move back to 11.2. 11.2, obviously, we have asked a lot of questions. So I just ask one more round. Is there any further questions on that item? Yeah, Councillor. Yeah, so that obviously will impact C.
My question, it might be for the Chief Exec, I'm not sure who's best placed to answer it, but what is the sort of, what is the difference between us pushing for a 7% rates increase, or whatever number, you know, 7, 8, whatever number people would want, now, and having the staff do the work on that? And I'm thinking of a bit of an internal discussion that we had the other day, where we're looking at, ultimately what we're looking for is to have something that's pretty solid around that number that people can then, we can consult on to go, if you go any lower, you have to really cut hard on these areas. And if you want to keep these other things in, if I'm, and Councillor Schuler can sort of help me flesh out the wording, but then you can put back in these other things. Like, what's the difference between having that in this resolution compared to having whatever number we've got in the resolution, and then working down by February to the 7%, and then working down even later to the 4%?
Well, we've got, in this resolution, we've got a 7 to 8%, and we've got a 4%.
Yes, I understand. I guess what I'm getting is like the anchoring, like the sort of default option. Does it make any difference at all to the information we get as to which one we choose as our default option?
I'd suggest it does. If you could guide us, direct us to deliver a comprehensive budget at a particular percentage increase, that would be very helpful. Otherwise, what we're doing is, the other option is we don't have the ability to build 3 budgets. But what we can do is provide and indicate the types of activities, the levels of service, the sum of reduction that we would need to do to achieve something lower, and or if something was higher, what you would get for that.
Yeah, Councillor Morris.
Thank you to the Chief Executive for that answer. The recommendations on the page don't reflect that, in my view. So what would you suggest in terms of a recommendation to achieve that goal?
Oh, there's been various numbers. If you're talking about a number, a percentage, I think we provided. I think the information in the report can indicate that somewhere in the middle ground, I think, would be a good option for us to focus on. And then you would know what we would be sacrificing to achieve that, and then what we would need to further sacrifice to go lower.
Councillor Correct.
So Chief Executive. So around the 20th of January, we are getting together to have a bit of a discussion around this. Would the timing of such information be okay in terms of the quantum of information that would be required for us to have some good understanding of what we're talking about? Compromises?
Yes, I think we could provide a reasonably solid list of the types of activities that we would have to shed, downsize, the projects we'd have to defer on the 20th, if you had a workshop planned or a meeting planned. Yeah. I'm looking at Catherine here, so look, we've got some base information now that we could refine between now and the 20th, which I think would give you a fairly good idea of what it would take to go lower than the middle ground.
Yes, we could provide some of that base information just to give you an idea of the scale of change that is required. So the executive report, taking out that 3 million, that did not come easy and does require work in itself, and that gets you, with the kind of decisions you're making, to about just over the 10% mark. To get down to 8 requires some significant change. That's about another 8 to 10 million of service level changes that we'd need to make. So it is quite significant and it would have impact. So we could circulate that kind of very high level, pretty much just ideas based, not particularly well priced yet, but it does give you an idea of what we're looking at beforehand, and then if you have other sort of areas of direction, you could provide that before Christmas, which might be a good idea.
Can I make a suggestion of a motion?
Yeah.
So I would be happy to move A, B. I think C is business as usual because we don't have to worry about that. D1, but happy with another choice for D. And then E, but just finish it. It agrees to receive options for rate reduction at the council meeting to achieve rates equivalent of 7 to 8%. But I would take out based on, because that's up to, you've heard what we've said. I wouldn't be specific about what it's based on. And then keep F and keep G. So really just suggesting that we would like the budget set on 7 to 8%. And that we get options, but we know what we're having to take out to achieve that, and we do get chunky numbers that take us to 4.
Yep.
That's me.
I don't disagree with your comment. I'm just saying, although from the point of view of people may or may not choose to read this, in terms of having that detail there in E, so what's the downside of leaving that in? Because I mean, they're very clearly, these are some big rock areas. So there's some thought gone into where that next level of change may come, or yeah, I'm happy that someone to tell me.
I mean, you can take it out if you like, but I guess we're indicating that that's in order to get it 7 to 8, it's going to have to include those types of changes. So.
Yeah, which is again.
I just didn't want to be as specific. I think that the 400 and 1 to 2, the 1 to 1.5. I'm looking at why we've got 8 million extra costs. So I'm thinking that might be a little bit higher. So it's just, we could say taking into account if you'd prefer that.
Yeah. Just take out the numbers maybe.
Yeah. Taking into account prioritisation of capital program, executive proposals for reductions in operating costs, and leave 3 the same.
Yeah. Sorry, Jen.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, do we need to, you're 7 to 8%, that's quite a variance. It should be 7 or 8%, or 7.5 or 7.1 or something. It should be something. The 7 to 8% is a bit ambiguous. Yeah, and I'm just wondering whether we're overcomplicating things. So whether we sort of draft a resolution that says sets a proposed rates increase for the draft annual plan at 8% as the starting point for development and consultation. Direct staff to prepare options to reduce the rates increase to as low as 4%, including identifying corresponding service level adjustments, deferrals, or alternate funding mechanisms. Does that get us to where we need to be? I'm just posing the question to the table.
I think that's achieving what I was aiming to achieve by using the current resolution. It's just, again, if the papers go out and then you completely change the resolution, it's a little bit harder to follow. So I was trying to follow this, but I would be as happy with that. But I just wonder if we do need to put in the A and B and the waters as well.
Yeah, we definitely need the water.
So I'm still happy with the resolution that I read out.
Yeah. Okay.
We can work with that.
Can we get that put up, and then have we got a seconder?
And I would change to 7.5. 7 to 8.
So we'll just get the resolution up, then I'll ask for a seconder.
It is D1 you want, eh?
Yeah, then there's an option for 4 as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Councillor Currat. Oh, sorry, Jen.
So in B, it says 1% of rates increase equivalent to 3.68. So, but if we shifted the water out, that'd be 3.25. Correct? Yep.
That's just saying, giving us where we're at right now. Yeah. Yeah. Just in E2, just N, you've got tin. Yeah.
And do we want to say 7.5 based on or including? Because we don't want to exclude other.
I think you said take
ideas.
Yeah.
Or take into account, yes, correct.
And then I think the 3 can stay in, I think. Was it? Yeah. Yeah, and then that 4% is good because that gets us to the rates capping. Cool. All right, so we've got that. Have we got a seconder for that? Yeah.
Point G, should we be a bit clearer whether we want that in or out of the budget?
Yes.
It just says it wasn't included, but do we want it included?
I believe we do. We haven't had a decision. We do have to have it as a budget requirement. So I think it needs to say, note that was not including and will be included in the budget. Because we don't have any choice, do we?
Well, we do, but...
Well, we do unless we want to vote out Maori Woods by ourselves. Yeah. So, Councillor Roseboom.
Yeah, that's too big a discussion for us to cover today, and that is dependent on the decision that we are going to make next year.
Yeah.
So the provision has to be there if the decision goes to have a referendum. So we need to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Just a concern around removing D, the D2 around the taking away that lever, which is potentially a 2.5% amount, which is really significant. I think we're missing something here, guys.
We're not taking away anything.
Well, haven't we removing that?
No, we're removing waters, so it has no impact on.
Yeah, but it's a $9 million difference. And just in terms of us, when we're looking at making some pretty big decisions, we're going to make some pretty big changes to remove that flexibility that, that could be adjusted, and it could be what we do in later years to take that outright. Am I reading this wrong? I just think that's a big lever that we're taking away from our ability to... We're not? Have I read that wrong? Sorry, fellow councillors? Oh, sorry. I will just delete that from the record quickly. I highlighted the wrong thing, sorry. I want to be real clear.
So have I got a seconder for as it lies on the table at the moment? Yeah, Councillor Roseboom, thank you. Would you like to talk, Councillor Schooler?
I think we've given some clear guidance following some good discussions of our own. I think we've got some more time to do discussions in terms of what this might look like. I hope it's taken as something that Māori and the executive take as hey, this is what the people of Tauranga do want to see from us as a council and from TCC. I think it's we're giving enough direction to say, please be innovative, please look at all your costs, please make sure we, give us some opportunity to look at those capital projects for prioritisation. And I think it's it'll give us some clarity in terms of what the value we give, because if we take it away, then it's not giving that value back to our people. So I'm comfortable that this is a good starting point for 26-27.
Councillor Roseboom.
Yeah, this is only a starting point for our annual plan discussions. Given the volume of legislation that's coming out of Wellington right now, every week the poll seems to move, and we've got to adjust the way we think and do things. Just from the time that we've put in our water services delivery plan, the changes in legislation, having a 4% rates cap when we're trying to stand up an entity is a bit of a challenge in itself. We're taking on costs to do something that the government wants us to do, and then they come out and said, well, we want you to reduce your rates down to 4%. So we would like a bit of help, Wellington, and around funding all these changes that you're imposing on us. You're imposing a lot of costs on our ratepayers by getting us to make decisions So it'd be very helpful if you'd fund some of the legislative changes that we're required to comply with, while in the process of trying to achieve a rates cap that I think is not in the best interests of the bulk of the Tauranga people. But yeah, this is a starting point for us to put together an annual plan that we can consult on, that the people of Tauranga can give us feedback on.
Councillor Morris.
You could support the removal of volumetric from this, because I think it gives us something more comparable with the government's proposed direction of the 4% rates cap in 2029. It's not apples with apples, it's sort of apples with oranges, but it's as close as we can get at this stage to having something that's comparable, and really be keen to get some good feedback from our community on what the 4% looks like. You know, in order to deliver that level, it's still an increase. Let's not lose sight of that. There's not a lot of businesses that can choose to increase their revenue by 4% next year, or even 7.5% next year. So it's still an increase, so let's not lose sight of that. But we know in order to achieve that, there's got to be, there's some pain in this house, and there's some reduction of service to the community as well. And in a community that does have cost of living as its number one concern, according to all the surveys of our community, whether it be key research, whether it be vital signs, whether it be other national surveys, we know that that is the key driver of concern in our community, and so we need to look at that as well.
Councillor Taylor.
As sort of stated by a couple of people, this is the starting point of quite a long process, which we're now veterans of. We've done one before, and we're into the second one. I think for the second year in a row, depreciation has become a major part of the increase that we're looking at, and I think as we head into the long-term plan situation in 18 months' time, our systems have to be a bit more robust about understanding what the longer-term impact of depreciation is on our assets and the capital program that we have. So the challenge to staff, I think, is to understand that better, and maybe we don't get quite the surprise, because when we're adding 20-odd million extra depreciation every year, it gets very difficult to make the thing look a bit more palatable.
You have a discussion? Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, happy to support this, and looking forward to the staff sort of working through it. I understand how challenging it'll be, and I think the expectations have been raised by the government by having the rates cap, and people are thinking in terms of 4% now, and even though the minister's given a bedding in time, I think the expectations are probably too high, and particularly for this council. And we've heard in the previous item, you know, a big reason for why that is because there have been big commitments to expensive capital projects which flow through into the operating costs and are starting to do so in this financial year coming. I do think one of the important things will be to report, you know, I'm happy to support the waters or the water change there, but I think we need to report it very clearly so that we have a column for the rates, the sort of core rates, and then we have a column for what the impact will be for water, and then we have a column for the IFF, because from the public's point of view, like when they pay their bill or bills, they're interested in how much more am I paying this coming year than last year. And you know, a big reason why I'm saying that is because in the LTP, that number, which I think was 10.4% from memory, that number included the water. So we have to do a like-for-like comparison. Whenever we do a media release and say in the LTP it was going to be 10.4, it's now X. X needs to be on the same basis as that 10.4, or else we have to change the 10.4 and put what that 10.4 is going to be without water. So I think we need to mix the metaphors a bit. We need apples with apples with apples, and that IFF will be smaller than what was in the LTP, presumably, because we only have one, and we've made some good savings there, and we'll be, I know Mahe he goes to Wellington, so he might have to have a word with the Reserve Bank Governor and hope that the interest rate stays lower than the one we've got. And we can keep talking about the savings we're making, but I do think with this we need to be really careful to always compare the apples with apples. I think we're heading in the right direction, and I think we just need to see what it's going to show that we're going to have to do to get to an even lower number of 4%, because my sense of it is that once the public sees what we'd have to do in this coming financial year to get to 4, they may not be so keen to do that. But we'll see what happens in the consultation, and thank you to everyone for supporting that approach of going out to our people and finding out what they think.
Yes, I support this. I think we're responding to a changing environment, and that's important. Obviously, taking the waters out, I think that does align with the direction the government is setting around the rates capping, and I think actually going out to our community and showing the impacts of this will be really good, because in all the discussion that's been talked about, the question has been asked, do you want to pay less? But no one has come out and said the ramifications of paying less is X, Y, and Z. So that's the opportunity here that we can show what that impact is at 4%, and what are the things that as a council we no longer will be able to do at that, because there is a direct consequence of cutting costs, and that is service. The cynic in me says we should be increasing our rates as much as we can this year, while we still can, because at the end of the day, you get a bigger base to start from, and this is unfortunately I guess the perverse behaviour that the way that this has been implemented, potentially could drive. However, although the cynic in me says that, my head says that the right thing to do is to go on the track that we should be going on, and that is making our ratepayers pay as less as they possibly can, depending on the outcome of that consultation as to where they're prepared to sacrifice and where they're not. So I think this is a good outcome. I acknowledge the challenge it's going to be to take more money out of the organisation, but I look forward to looking back and seeing what those options are, and whether we think our community can live with them. Yeah, Councillor Shulman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. It is a difficult one, but what I do like about this approach, we have been in this job for 18 months, I suppose, and we have heard a lot. And through the last process, we heard a lot about, there was even people saying, give us 0 increases. And we certainly have got our feet under the desk a lot more, and we already do have a good understanding, I think, about what the community wants. I think being able to say we can work towards this, and here are the consequences of this to the public. Often we don't hear from, maybe it's a silent majority, that isn't, that are happy that we can have some rates increases, and their main concern is that we spend the money that they give us well. So working with council to say these are the places we can get to, and these are the consequences of that, and us with the council, and then interfacing with the public. I really do hope that if we do get to, through the public and through the consultation process, that we do get the voice of everyone, and really get real clarity. We've all got an understanding and a feel of what it is, but being able to sit down and say, here's a level, at that level, this is what the consequence is, and if we go further, this is also what, and when it will start to, really impact people on terms of levels of service, then, our community needs to tell us. So yeah, I'll support this, and it's just a start, like everyone says.
Councillor Kurak.
Yeah, I think in terms of the comment by Councillor Schuler around the silent majority, it will be a silent minority, and we'll hear from them. for sure. I think this process is going to be good to come out with the options, and but I think the difficulty is getting people to fully understand what the consequences are, and that's our job to inform them. I'm looking forward to a survey going out, a scientifically based, demographically sound survey, to get a true indication of the support for the options and the compromises that people are willing to take or not. So certainly looking forward to the process.
Would you like to wrap up, Deputy Mayor?
I think it's been a good discussion, and thank you for all of that feedback that goes into it. And I think just it feels really good that we're wanting to talk to our people about this, and that we want the options to talk to our people about this, and that we recognise that we are responding to a changing environment. So it's I think it's a positive way forward.
Right now, I'm happy to put the resolution to the council. Ask all those in favour. Aye. Those against? That is carried. Thank you. Right, we'll take a morning tea break. We'll come back at 11:05. Thank you.